Okay, so we're back now for part 2. And now what we're going to look at is called factoring trinomials. Tri means 3, and it's where the lead coefficient is equal to 1. A trinomial looks like this: 1x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, or we'll just think of it as x squared plus bx plus c. The first term, the x squared, is called the quadratic term. The middle term is called the linear. And then the c value that does not have the x, that's called the constant. That's just going to be a number usually. Okay, so we've got the quadratic term, the linear. Also, we'll call this the middle term. And then we have the constant. Okay, so that is a trinomial. We have 3 terms. Now, before we do factoring, let's go back to multiplying. If we multiply 2 binomials, bi means 2. Okay, so x plus 3 is a binomial, and x plus 4 is another binomial. Now, to multiply this, what we do is we distribute. I call it double distribute, but you may have learned FOIL, F-O-I-L, first, outside, inside, last. What's happening is this first x is going to distribute to x plus 4. So x will multiply x, which is x squared. X will multiply 4, which is 4x. But then I also have to distribute my second term, which is positive 3. So 3 will multiply x, which is 3x. 3 will then multiply 4, which is 12. Now notice that we do have 2 like terms. We always have to combine like terms at the end. So 4x plus 3x is, actually I like to circle them. That's 7x. So we get x squared plus 7x plus 12. That is the product. So we multiply 2 binomials, we get a trinomial. If we did x minus 6 times x plus 3, let's go ahead and double distribute again. So this x will distribute to the second pair of parentheses. X times x is x squared. X times 3 is plus 3x. Then we have to distribute minus 6 to both terms here. Minus 6x minus 6 times 3 is minus 18. Again, we have like terms, positive 3x minus 6x. If we combine them, we get x squared minus 3x minus 18. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is that I want you to notice a couple of patterns. Notice that the 12, the constant here, is what we got from 3 times 4. So when we multiply 3 times 4, we got 12. But notice that the middle term 7 comes from adding 3 plus 4. So if we multiply these 2 numbers, we get the constant. But if we add them, we get the middle term, the linear. Does it work over here? Well, if we do negative 6 times 3, what we get is the constant, negative 18. If we do negative 6 plus 3, we get negative 3, which is the middle term, the middle coefficient. So what happens here is that when we factor, we're going to work backwards, but we recognize that there's a pattern, that if we multiply these 2 numbers, we get the constant. If we add them, we get the middle. 3 plus 4 is 7, 3 plus 4 is 7, not 12. If we add them, we get the middle term. If we multiply, we get the constant. If we add them, we get the middle coefficient, the middle number. So in number 7, we want to factor x squared plus 9x plus 20. Well, can we think of 2 numbers that multiply to 20 that add up to 9? Okay, so when we do this, what we'll always do is we'll start with factors of 20. Okay, so think of pairs of numbers that multiply to 20. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. What we're looking for is a pair of these that also add up to 9. And 1 plus 20 is 21, 2 plus 10 is 12, 4 plus 5 is 9. And what we can do here we know that these first two terms are going to be x, because when we distribute, we get x times x. But the other two values will be positive 4 and positive 5. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 plus 5 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 plus 4 is 7. Negative 6 times 3 is negative 18. Negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3x. So all we're doing is working backwards here. Factoring is the reverse of distributing. So the two factors are x plus 4 and x plus 5. Number 8, can you think of two numbers that multiply to the constant, so multiply to 12, and add up to the middle value, which is negative 8? Okay, so what multiplies to 12? 1 and 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Now, something that happens here, it's got to multiply to a positive number, but it has to add to a negative. So what's going to happen is we're going to have minus times minus, because multiplying two negatives is positive, and a negative times a negative gives us a negative value. Okay, so we need to add up to negative 8, negative 2, and negative 6. So the two factors are x minus 2 and x minus 6. If you don't believe me, go ahead and multiply it back out. And if I do, I'll check this one. X times x, x squared, x times negative 6, minus 6x. Negative 2 times x is minus 2x. Negative 2 times negative 6 is positive 12. Combine the two like terms, and what you get, x squared minus 8x plus 12. So that means when you factor, this is equivalent to this. It's just in a factored form, where this is not. All right, flip it over. Let's do a few more examples. In number 9, okay, factor the following trinomials. Okay, so now we need two numbers that multiply to negative 18 that add up to negative 7. Okay, it has to multiply to the constant. It has to add up to the middle number. All right, now what multiplies to 18? I'm going to ignore the negative at the beginning here. 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6. Now here's the thing though, let's go back to this. It's a negative 18. To multiply to a negative, one number must be positive and one number must be negative. So we're looking for two values that multiply to negative 18 that add up to negative 7, positive 2, negative 9. It has to fit. It has to fit. If it doesn't fit, we can't use it. 2 times negative 9 is negative 18. 2 plus negative 9 is negative 7. So our answer, our factors are x plus 2 times x minus 9. So as you do this, you start to get pretty fast at these. X squared plus 10x minus 24. So what multiplies to negative 24 and adds up to 10? You got to be careful with this one. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. There are a lot of factors, a lot of possible factor pairs. It has to add up to positive 10, so you're going to be tempted to say 4 and 6. But there's a problem. It has to multiply to negative 24. That means it must be positive and positive. It has to be positive times negative. Well, if you do 4 times 6, you get positive 24. No, that doesn't work. What if we try negative times negative? Because that adds up to negative 10. Well, it adds up to negative 10, but that also multiplies to negative 24. Or it multiplies to positive 24. So 4 and 6 is going to be tempting, but it doesn't fit. We can't use that. What we're actually going to use is 2 and 12. Now it has to add up to positive 10, so I'm going to do positive 12 and negative 2. Negative 2 times positive 12 is negative 24. Negative 2 plus 12 is positive 10. So we get x minus 2 times x plus 12. Now number 11 looks like the exact same problem, except now the 24 is positive, and there's also another variable. If you also have a second variable like y and y squared, it doesn't change anything. We're still looking for two numbers that multiply to 24 that add up to 10. This time, I'm not going to rewrite this because we have all the pairs here. This time we use 4 and 6. 4 times 6 is positive 24. 4 plus 6 is positive 10. Now the only thing that I've got to be careful about is when I write this, it's x plus 4y times x plus 6y. That is the answer. The reason, so we don't really worry about the second variable until we get to the end. If you distribute, you'd get x squared. The middle terms would be plus 6xy plus 4xy, which gives you your positive 10xy. And then 4y times 6y is 24. Y times y is y squared, so it fits. All right, number 12, what multiplies to 49 and adds up to negative 14? 49 only has two factor pairs, 1 and 49, 7 and 7. Now 7, 7 is our answer, but it has to add up to negative 14, so it's going to be negative, negative. And that's okay because a negative times a negative is positive, and then these would add up to negative 14. So we have x minus 7y. Don't forget the second variable, x minus 7y. And actually, since these are the same, you could write this x minus 7y, parentheses, that whole thing squared. Either way is good, but that's x minus 7y. A number times itself is a number squared. Number 13, you're going to say, whoa, that looks a little different. We are missing the middle term. I'm going to write that as 0x, okay, because 0 times anything is 0. So we don't have the middle term, but this is going to be the same process. You're thinking, what multiplies to negative 36 and adds up to 0? Now to add up to 0, the two factors have to be opposites of each other. Now there are a lot of factor pairs here, but to add up to 0, you'd have to have a positive and negative that are the same. So we're going to do 6 and 6. Positive 6 times negative 6 is negative 36, but when you add opposites, you get 0. So this will be x plus 6 times x minus 6. Those are the factors. And then the last one here, you'll notice this is out of order. I always write my x squared term first. So I'm going to first change the order. Now that is a negative x squared. And then plus 4x, this is a positive 5. The other thing that I'm going to do is I want this to be a positive x squared. To do that, I'm going to factor a negative 1 out of all of these terms. So I'm going to pull out a negative 1, because when I divide by a negative, this becomes x squared. Now this would become minus 4x. This would become minus 5. So what we have left in the parentheses here, that's a trinomial, quadratic term, linear term, constant. So on the side, what multiplies to negative 5 and adds up to negative 4? Well, what multiplies to 5, the only things that do that are 1 and 5. So let's see, multiplies to negative 5, adds to negative 4. That would be positive 1 and negative 5. Multiplies to negative 5, and if you add these, you get negative 4. So what happens here, our binomial factors are x plus 1 times x minus 5, but don't forget there was a minus out front. And that is the end of part 2.